And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Remember to hit that subscribe button. It really does help us out. Gained a ton of you to our community over the past few days. Let's see if we can keep that momentum going. Now, last week we already went over the American League East, Central, and West. Went over each division winner. Today we'll kind of go through all three of them as well, starting with the National League East, or the NL Central, and then end up with the NL West. Now, if you've already paid attention to the other videos, we did all 30 teams in one big video, but we wanted to kind of go into depth a little bit more with this video, go team by team, lineup by lineup, rotation by rotation. So let us know what you think of these 5 teams in the NL East. Leave a comment and stay tuned later in the day as we'll go through each team as well in the NL Central and the NL West. So without further ado, let's get it going. The first team I want to kind of touch on is going to be the Atlanta Braves. Now, they just came off a World Series victory, obviously a great thing for their franchise. All those division titles that they gained over those 13 or however many it was in years in a row where they won the division title anyway, and only came out with one World Series. Now, we've already heard from John Smoltz, Tom Glavine, and Greg Maddux anyway, all said they wouldn't change anything about that experience. They wouldn't trade all those division titles for another World Series, and you kind of can't blame them. All of them had exemplary careers. All of them ended up in the Hall of Fame. So they earned a well-earned round of applause there. However, this was a new era of Atlanta baseball. Freddie Freeman, Ronald Acuna, that's kind of your new faces of the Atlanta Braves. However, this offseason we saw a little bit of change. The Atlanta Braves did not bring back their franchise icon in Freddie Freeman, and that's kind of where I want to start. Before we started the video, I did get a comment anyway. Will the loss of Freddie Freeman affect the Braves more than the addition of Matt Olson? Now, for those of you who have not paid attention over the offseason, Freddie Freeman is no longer a member of the world champion Atlanta Braves. He left his homegrown team anyway for his actual hometown team in the LA Dodgers. He's going to be their first baseman, left-handed hitter. Everything the Atlanta Braves are going to miss is now going to be with the hated Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, they did get Matt Olson. It did cost them more than one pretty penny. They had to give up Christian Pache, Shea Langeliers, the number 6 and number 14 prospect in addition to those two. So quite a haul for the Oakland A's to get for Matt Olson. At the time, Matt Olson only had 2 years left on his deal. Since then, the Atlanta Braves have signed him to an extension worth $160 million over 8 years, kind of what they were hoping to get Freddie Freeman at for that number of years anyway. But just were not able to come to terms anyway with Freddie Freeman's camp. His price was a little bit too high, and that's why they decided to go with Matt Olson. Now, the question asks if the loss of Freddie Freeman is going to affect the Braves more than the addition of Matt Olson. Freddie Freeman, in my opinion, is the best first baseman in the game and has been for a number of years. Now, there are some people who will come out and say Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had even better of an offensive season. He may have, but that's 1 year of baseball versus all the evidence that I have of Freddie Freeman. Sure, Freddie Freeman is older, but I don't expect his talent to drop off a cliff. I still think he's the best defensive first baseman out of the two. And for my money anyway, Freddie Freeman is the best first baseman in all of baseball. There is going to be some drop off to Matt Olson. So that's why there is going to be a little bit more effect of the loss of Freddie Freeman, not to mention what he brought to that clubhouse. He was everything to that team last year. After they lost Ronald Acuna and their entire starting outfield last year, Marcell Ozuna to suspension due to domestic violence issues. Nick Markakis went down. They had brought in Soler, Eddie Rosario, Duvall they brought back from the Miami Marlins. Jock Peterson they brought in as well. Things just didn't work out very well injury-wise in the middle of the season for the Atlanta Braves. They thought they'd piecemeal it together because they didn't want to give up on the season. And great job. They didn't do that. They got the World Series MVP in Jorge Soler from the Kansas City Royals. He was phenomenal for them. He did suffer some injuries down the stretch at the end of last year, but he was phenomenal for them. He is no longer on the Atlanta Braves. But in my opinion, the loss of Freddie Freeman is going to greatly outweigh the impact Matt Olson is going to have. Now, in 3 or 4 years, could Matt Olson be a better first baseman than Freddie Freeman? Absolutely. In fact, I expect it. But for this season, 2022, my prediction, the loss of Freddie Freeman is going to hurt more. They're still going to be without Ronald Acuna for at least a month. So we'll see how much they're going to miss that bat in the middle of the lineup. Now, let's kind of go down the roster itself anyway. The Atlanta Braves, they did bring back Eddie Rosario, playoff hero for them. So great on them for bringing him back. The loss of Jorge Soler, though, will be impactful. The addition of Marcell Ozuna back into the lineup will be very helpful for them as well. It'll be interesting to see how he meshes with that clubhouse after all the issues he had off the field last year. Are the Braves really going to stick by him for a number of years after this? Remains to be seen. There's a lot of money tied up in him, at least for the next couple of years. So we'll see what kind of production they can get out of Ozuna. Austin Riley did find a stroke last year. He had struggled to find some consistency in his playing time, both because of his bat wasn't playing up to snuff anyway, and also because they just couldn't find a position for him on the field. He now has solidified himself as a third baseman there in Atlanta, kind of taking over that Chipper Jones spot. Maybe he's the next face of the Atlanta Braves. If Ronald Acuna's injuries are a little bit more significant, he's not able to come back as well as we might have thought. Ozzie Albies is still there at second base. Duvall is still going to be in there in center anyway, at least until Acuna gets back. It'll be interesting to see if they actually play Acuna in center when he comes back, just because of the injury and everything. Maybe they play him in right field a little bit to kind of give him a little bit of reprieve anyway. They did bring in Dickerson to kind of fill that gap anyway, at least until Acuna does come back to the big leagues. Travis d'Arnaud is still your catcher. Dansby Swanson is still your shortstop. And Eddie Rosario is now your everyday left fielder. Ozuna, I expect to play at designated hitter. Otherwise, he would be your left fielder. But the biggest change in this lineup, obviously, is Freddie Freeman is no longer in this lineup. Matt Olson takes his spot. Not as good of an on-base guy, not as good as far as contact, those kinds of things. Does bring a little bit more power than Freddie Freeman. So we'll see if maybe they tinker how they go about attacking the baseball from a lineup perspective. Maybe they let Matt Olson try to mash a little bit more. Maybe let the other guys, instead of trying to mash a little bit as well, try to make them more singles and doubles hitters. We'll see what happens there. From the rotation side, Soroka obviously is still injured. They do have Max Fried. Charlie Morton was injured at the end of the postseason. He's still going to be there. They signed him to a one-year extension. Ian Anderson acquitted himself very well in the postseason last year. Played very, very, very well for the Atlanta Braves. Kyle Wright, kind of been a middling starter, reliever guy for a couple of years now for the Atlanta Braves. Former top prospect. Just wasn't able to find much consistency in the first couple of years. Did have a couple of good performances in the postseason. Maybe that'll build his confidence. He is going to be in the starting rotation this year, so maybe some consistency there as far as getting the ball every 5 days will help improve his abilities as well. And Huascar Ynoa is going to be your number 5 starter. The big addition for the bullpen is going to be Kenley Janssen. They got him from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Being able to close out games is going to be very important for them. So they have beefed up that back end of the bullpen. Maybe that's the one area they can possibly go after the Dodgers. However, the Dodgers did, of course, just get Craig Kimbrell, who started his career with, of course, the Atlanta Braves. Kind of interesting how they flip those around. So let us know in the comment section where you think the Atlanta Braves are going to finish, but we'll get to our prediction at the end of the video. Next team on the list is going to be the Miami Marlins. The Miami Marlins, the biggest change for them, of course, came in the front office. Derek Jeter is no longer part owner of the team. To me, this signals everything you need to know about where this team is headed. Sure, they did the right thing, trimmed payroll, got younger, got a lot of good young talent now on the team. Derek Jeter left because he was ready to now spend. And they did spend a little bit, don't get me wrong. They go after Jorge Soler, 3 years, $36 million. They get Avisail Garcia. At the time, I thought he was going to play center field. He's not a fit in center just because of the way the money was spread around. It looks like he may end up still going there. Maybe they go with Jesus Sanchez in center. But this lineup still needs some more thump in it. They got a lot of swing and miss guys in it. Jesus Aguilar, Garcia, of course, Soler. Soler's numbers in the World Series were epic. If they get anywhere near that type of production, they got themselves one heck of a steal for 3 years and $36 million. But the reason why Derek Jeter left was Nick Castellanos, who went to the division rival, Philadelphia Phillies. It sounded like Nick Castellanos wanted $5 and $100 from the Miami Marlins. He is a native of Miami, so they had their foot in the door and probably had the upper hand. But it sounds like after the money went to Garcia, they didn't want to play at that level of money. Of course, it sounded like they wanted to keep their name in the ring at the very end anyway, just because he's a Miami boy. But I'm not fooled by that. To me, this is all about the Miami Marlins not willing to invest in their team again. Now, they've been burned by big contracts in the past. Of course, Giancarlo Stanton. Unfortunately, the untimely death of Jose Fernandez a few years back. The Miami Marlins would be in a much different place if they still had Fernandez on this roster. They probably never would have traded Yelich, Ozuna, or Stanton. They probably would have won a division title out of it. But ever since his death, anyway, this franchise just hasn't been able to get their feet again. Anyway, they've gotten a lot of young talent. Jazz Chisholm is going to be your second baseman. He's going to lead off this year. Great young player. Jacob Stallings they acquired this offseason from the Pirates. From a lineup perspective, they got a lot of good young talent. But my question is, where's the proven veteran that's going to show leadership on this team? Avisail Garcia is more of a journeyman. Soler finally had a great postseason last year. Does he bring the leadership? I don't think so. Jesus Aguilar, maybe he brings the leadership for you. But again, I don't think so. I just don't see where the leadership's going to come from. I don't see the massive production that they're going to get. Nick Castellanos would have changed this lineup for me, probably made them a division contender. But for me, they're not going to be in the postseason. They're going to be a nice story. They got a lot of good young pitchers. They extended the contract of Sandy Alcantara in their rotation. They did a lot of good, interesting moves last year, getting Jesus Luzardo from the Oakland A's and kind of a deadline move. They got a lot of good young pitchers. Their bullpen, a bunch of young guys as well. But if you'll notice the theme here, a bunch of young guys. And that's been the thing they've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years. Jeter thought they were ready to turn the page and try to win since they had all this young talent ready at the major league level. But the management wasn't willing to go there. The money just wasn't there. After they divvied it out to Garcia and Soler, there just wasn't enough left to go around to go to any other major acquisitions. Therefore, Jeter's out, and this tells me everything I need to know about where the Marlins are headed over the next 5 years. Next on the list, we got the New York Mets. The New York Mets, of course, I've gotten a lot of comments on them in a number of my videos asking me what I think of the addition of Max Scherzer. What do I think of the 1-2 punch of DeGrom and Scherzer? We already saw DeGrom is going to miss a month due to injury, and Scherzer already has a soft tissue injury, but he's going to make the opening day roster. Doesn't sound like he's going to miss time. He did have that dead arm syndrome, thing in the postseason. And if you know anything about Max Scherzer, he takes that ball every single time, hurt or not. And for him to not take the ball in a postseason elimination game tells me everything about where Max Scherzer's health is and gives me a lot of pause about this New York Mets team. They've invested a lot of money. They've invested a lot of it very well in the lineup, in my opinion. They got Mark Canha cheaply for the Oakland A's. They got Starling Marte only on a 4-year deal. I thought for sure he would have gotten 5. Granted that he is a little bit older, but the production that he gives you and then the offensive explosion that he had in Oakland's with the Oakland A's last year, the New York Mets lineup is going to be lethal. But that starting rotation is where I still have questions, mainly because of health. Carlos Carrasco, injury risk. Taijuan Walker, injury risk. Chris Bassett is also over 30 years old, but he's been money over the last few years. He is in the final year of his deal. Maybe he tries to prove a little bit more, provides you that ace-level stuff for number 3 spot, and that's fantastic if you can get that, on top of keeping DeGrom and Scherzer in the starting rotation. But as we've already seen, you're missing DeGrom for a month already. The reason why he didn't win the Cy Young last year, because he got hurt. So again, injury issues in the starting rotation scare the bejesus out of me. In fact, the one thing that I thought they could have done was possibly go out and get a starting pitcher. And the surprise to me was that they didn't do it. New York Mets fans outrage at the possibility of acquiring Eric Hosmer, Chris Paddock, and a reliever from the San Diego Padres, Pagan, in exchange for Dom Smith, and that's all you'd have had to given up. And they were outraged at that. Are you kidding me? You need depth in that starting staff. You have a lot of injury risk there. Sure, you have a couple of other players who've been around the major league level, but that's major league level replacement level stuff. Chris Paddock, of course, he hasn't been fantastic since he came into the big leagues, but he's still very young and a very highly touted prospect. You get league average replacement in Eric Hosmer for Dom Smith's production. Dom Smith was not going to play every day for you anyway, so I don't understand why the New York Mets were up in arms about it. They're only going to have to end up paying $7 million a year to Eric Hosmer. They were getting $25 million in cash back as well. Pagan goes into the bullpen and helps beef up that side for you as well. I just don't understand where Mets fans were getting off saying that this trade was going to be horrible for them. I just don't see why it would have been horrible. You get depth in the starting staff. You replace Dom Smith with Hosmer. And you're only paying him $7 million a year. By the way, one win for a replacement level player is $8 million. That's about the value of a win. And that's about the value of Eric Hosmer's contract for league average production. I don't see where Mets fans are getting all upset about it. Sure, he may not have been the perfect piece on your team. Dom Smith wasn't your perfect piece either. He was going to be a bench piece, and for Eric Hosmer to come in and possibly be that bench piece for you would have been just as good. And on top of that, you get depth in that starting staff and a bullpen arm. I don't understand it. Let me know in the comments section if you're a Mets fan why you were up or outraged at that trade. I just don't understand why. From the lineup perspective, they added a number of other pieces as well. Eduardo Escobar is going to be your third baseman. One side note here, Todd Frazier did retire from Major League Baseball. Congratulations to him on an excellent career. Robinson Cano is going to be back in the major leagues this year. Probably slots in as the DH every day anyway for the Mets. McNeil takes over the second base job. McCann comes over, I believe, from the Detroit Tigers anyway, and takes over that catcher spot. Brandon Nimmo is going to be your leadoff hitter. Very lengthy lineup. The one concern, of course, is going to be Francisco Lindor. It sounds like he might have finally come to grips with his contract. Spring training, he seemed a little bit more at ease this year than he had in the past couple of years since he came to the Mets. So maybe he finally settles in and finds a home in New York. Again, from that starting staff, though, injury issues are the main thing I worry about. DeGrom and Scherzer already have injury issues going for them. Chris Bassett, final year of his deal. He is a little bit older, so maybe you get a little bit extra production out of him in a contract year. Carlos Carrasco, injury risk. Taijuan Walker, injury risk. Gazelman, I think, is still in the bullpen for them. Injury, not injury, but production just hasn't been great for him. Never been able to seize the opportunity there. Seth Lugo, any number of other young pitchers that they have, just never have really solidified themselves in the major leagues yet. From the bullpen side, they still have Edwin Diaz as their closer. He's kind of up and down for me. He was great with the Mariners. Then ever since the trade to the Mets, he hasn't been able to find that level of consistency that he had with the Mariners. So we'll see if they go out and address that bullpen around the deadline. But for me, health is everything for this team. That starting staff is already missing Jacob deGrom for a month of the season, maybe more. The news that came out is that they were going to address his situation 4 weeks in and reevaluate where he is. Now, that does not mean that he's already starting to throw and ready to come back after 4 weeks. That means they're going to examine him and see where he's at. That should scare the tar out of any Mets fan. And again, why didn't they go after more starting pitching, and why did Mets fans have outrage when they did try to go after some? I just don't understand. Next on the list is going to be the Washington Nationals. The Washington Nationals did a great job selling off pieces last year. They got a lot younger. Keibert Ruiz is going to be your catcher now for the next 6 years for the Washington Nationals. Great prospect. Josh Bell, I don't expect him to hang around long. They did get him from the Pirates about a year or so ago. Great first baseman, power hitter, but he's never going to command the contract that, say, like a 10-year, $300 million deal. First baseman who can't move, defensive liability as well. And then they brought in Nelson Cruz, another defensive liability because of his age. The bat should play with the Washington Nationals, so maybe they surprise a few teams, get a few extra wins because that team will mash for at least some of those positions. Mikhail Franco is now your third baseman. The one piece for me that just never has taken off for them is going to be Victor Robles. Victor Robles was supposed to be the better prospect of the two between him and Juan Soto. Robles just hasn't taken off the way Juan Soto has. Juan Soto is obviously an aircraft carrier type player, epic from both sides of the plate. Maybe you want a little bit more power out of him, but for me, he's everything you want out of that outfielder. He's been great ever since he came into the league, but I want to see a little bit more out of Victor Robles. Maybe this is the breakout year we've been waiting for. A bunch of journeymen around the rest of the lineup here. Mikhail Franco takes over at third base, Lane Thomas in left field. You got Alcides Escobar at shortstop. Keyboom is, of course, still there. We'll see what he ends up doing. Cesar Ruiz is going to be your second baseman. Again, journeyman. This lineup is going to have some great days because of the mashers that they have in it, Soto, Cruz, and Bell, with the addition of Ruiz. But it's journeyman. They are still a few years away from being a very solid, productive starting lineup. From the pitching side, Patrick Corbin was absolutely atrocious last year. Maybe there's some injury issues that could have played into it possibly, but for my money, this year is all about rebuilding the value of Corbin and then flipping him at the deadline for a team in need of a starter. Josiah Gray was the other piece that they got from the Dodgers. Great, fantastic starting pitcher. He is going to be an ace for this team. either this year or next. I have no doubt about it. I've had my eye on him ever since he was a prospect for the Cincinnati Reds. I was shocked they gave him away in a salary dump type of move. Shocked. I'm telling you, floored. And he did nothing but take off when he went to the Dodgers. And then, of course, I was shocked again when the Dodgers were actually able to get Scherzer and Trey Turner. But that's the kind of the price it was going to take a piece like Josiah Gray. Eric Fedde is going to be in your starting rotation. Anibal Sanchez, of course, is still there. Or anyway, came out of retirement and is there. But this team has got a lot of journeymen in it, and they're going to be looking to flip those pieces at the deadline and possibly go even younger this offseason. So if you're a Nationals fan, sorry, I just don't believe your team is going to be around for very long as far as in the standings anyway. Last team in the division is going to be the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, let us know in the comment section if you're a Phillies fan, because they made a lot of changes to their roster this offseason, most notably in that starting lineup. First, let's go with Kyle Schwarber. Had a great postseason with the Boston Red Sox. Maybe he finally figured out some things as far as his swing and what he needs to do. The success that he had early with the Chicago Cubs, he looks like he finally found that same thing with the Boston Red Sox last year. We'll see if he can continue that. The contract, 4 years, and I believe $79 million is what they ended up giving him. It's about $20 million a year. There was rumors that they would go after Chris Bryant, but it sounds like they'd have chose another way to go about it, divvying up that Chris Bryant money between Schwarber and Nick Castellanos. The other big addition that they made was Nick Castellanos. Remember, we mentioned earlier in the video, the Miami Marlins were hard after him. At least it seemed like they were after him if you had paid attention to the media reports. I wasn't buying it. The ownership for the Miami Marlins just wasn't going to pay at that level. 5 and 20 was about what it was going to take. Jeter wanted him and was going to give it to him, or at least was willing to at least go that far as a contract, but the rest of the owners were not. For the Philadelphia Phillies, Dave Dombrowski is all about winning. And that's why they went after Nick Castellanos. Now, they're going to have their defensive liabilities. Schwarber is not a great defender in left field. Nick Castellanos probably plays as your designated hitter, maybe flips with Rhys Hoskins as your first baseman, but they have a lot of defensive liabilities, both at left field, first base. And then, of course, they still have a lot of youth in the infield. They have Alec Baum, at third base. Center field was interesting as far as Odubel Herrera is there. They still got a couple of young pieces that they could go for in center field as well. The one piece I was surprised they didn't push a little harder for was Starling Marte. He would have been fantastic for this team. On-base guy would hit in front of Bryce Harper, allow Real Muto to not have as much stress on him from an offensive side anyway, allow him to settle into that 4, 5, 6 role. Instead, I expect him to hit right in front of Harper in that number 2 role. Castellanos, pencil him in as that number 4 hitter. Schwarber's probably going to be your leadoff hitter this year. The one piece that never gets talked about enough for the Philadelphia Phillies is Gene Segura. On-base guy, had a fantastic couple of years with the Seattle Mariners, got flipped to the Philadelphia Phillies a couple of years ago, and has been fantastic for them as well. Didi Gregorius is still there for the shortstop, but he's not going to be there long. Surprised they didn't play for a shortstop. Dave Dombrowski is all going after titles and spending that money, reckless abandon, giving up prospects, and I thought they might go that way again at that position, but it sounds like Didi Gregorius has that connection with Joe Girardi, the manager, and maybe they felt comfortable enough with him to be able to cover that position and save that money and divvy it out among Schwarber and Nick Castellanos. From the starting staff, they do still have Kyle Gibson. Zach Eflin is still there, but the main 2 horses are going to be Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. They're probably going to go after another arm at the deadline, but for my money, Wheeler is going to have a little bit of issues coming off of some injury issues over the lockout period. It sounded like anyway that the team wasn't ready for him to start opening day. Aaron Nola should take that mantle in the beginning. We'll see if Wheeler can have just as effective as a year as he had last year, but that remains to be seen. But again, this team went out last year and got Kyle Gibson to kind of fortify that rotation. It looks to me like they're probably going to need to do that again this trade deadline. From a bullpen's perspective, they did go out and get Corey Knebel to take over that 9th inning role. He came from the Dodgers last year. He was fantastic for them. He was fantastic for the Brewers before that. I've had my eye on him ever since he was traded to my favorite team anyway, the Texas Rangers. I was kind of surprised they flipped him to Milwaukee when they did, but he's been a great arm ever since he's came up to the big leagues. Has always had success. He did have some injury issues for about a year with the Milwaukee Brewers. That's what kind of led him to go to the Los Angeles Dodgers, rebuild a little bit of that value, and he was everything you'd want a closer to be for the Los Angeles Dodgers last year. They had Kenley Janssen, but when Janssen wasn't there or wasn't able to perform in that closer role, they went to Corey Knebel, and he performed very admirably in that role. So maybe that bullpen finally is going to be solved for the Philadelphia Phillies. That's been nothing but a black hole for them for the last few years. Let us know in the comment section what you think of Knebel solidifying that bullpen. Now, of course, I mentioned Joe Girardi is still the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, and that might be the one area that I'm most excited about the Philadelphia Phillies is that Joe Girardi needs to have a lot of pieces in that bullpen in order for him to be able to finagle that pitching staff. Bryce Harper, of course, was an MVP level player last year. They did solidify that lineup, but they should go a long way this season. But let's get to the predictions. Kind of run down the list here. The Atlanta Braves were the World Series champions last year. They were fantastic. The loss of Freddie Freeman, though, is going to affect them more than the addition of Matt Olson and the addition of Kenley Janssen. I just don't see them overcoming the loss of Freddie Freeman and Acuna being out for at least a month to start the year as being a good thing for the team. Sure, Matt Olson might be a better player in year 4 of his contract, but we're talking about 2022, and I don't see them being able to win the division. Could they compete for a playoff spot? Absolutely. I already mentioned the Miami Marlins. They're not in the competition for me. They just weren't willing to go to the level they needed to go for a player like Nick Castellanos. They need to invest a little bit more in veteran leadership on this team, effective veteran leadership, I should say, not middling veteran on the team like Jorge Soler. We'll see if he can take off after his MVP level performance in the World Series, but I'm not holding my breath. He signed a 3-year, $36 million deal for a reason, because it was a flash in the pan. We've seen flashes in the pan from him before. This one was a little bit more extended and on the grandest stage of them all for baseball anyway. But for my money, you're still at least one hitter away and one pitcher away from being in contention for the division crown. Now, we've already mentioned the Washington Nationals. They're going to be sellers at the trade deadline. Not even going to waste your time. They're going to finish in the cellar of this division. They're going to finish 5th. Miami Marlins are going to finish in that 4th spot. For my money, the 3rd place team is going to be the Atlanta Braves. I just don't see them being able to overcome the loss of Freddie Freeman as effectively as everyone else is. The addition of Kenley Janssen does help them, but that bullpen was much better in the postseason, and we saw how effective they were without Janssen, and I don't see it as much of an improvement. Now, that bullpen wasn't great during the season, and Kenley Janssen was fantastic down the stretch last year. We're talking all-time level greatness out of Kenley Janssen last year down the stretch. But I don't see it infecting enough innings for this to really combat the loss of Freddie Freeman on an everyday perspective. Now, 1st and 2nd place, it's a toss-up for me between the Mets and the Phillies. I've gone back and forth between both teams. The Mets, for my money, because of the health issues that came out through spring training, DeGrom missing a month, Scherzer already having some tightness and soft tissue injuries, but he's still going to make the start for opening day. The injuries are just too much for me to be able to put them on top of the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies do need to address their starting staff as far as maybe getting another starter, maybe a Luis Castillo at the deadline. Dombrowski is famous for giving away his top prospects, saying the heck with the future, and getting that piece that they need to win the crown. And I expect them to do so at the deadline this year. So my prediction as of right now is Phillies 1, Mets 2, Braves 3, Marlins 4, and Nationals 5. Let us know in the comment section what you think. And again, just to answer this question, basically everybody's been asking me all offseason is how much are the Braves going to miss Freddie Freeman? They're going to miss him a ton. He was everything to that team. He was the heartbeat of that team. And they are going to need to find a new rhythm for that team to be able to find some success again. And we'll see if they can in the next couple of years. They got a lot of good young pieces. However, they gave away a lot of those pieces in order to fill the hole Freddie Freeman left by bringing in Matt Olson. Let us know in the comments section. Let us know what you think about where this division ends up, what you think these teams are going to end up doing, what deadline acquisitions you think they're going to end up making. And opening day is tomorrow. So welcome back to baseball, everybody, and welcome back to the Upside.